Night 2 of the first Democratic presidential debate for the 2020 election cycle featured 4 of the top 5 polling candidates: Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, Kamala Harris, and Pete Buttigieg, joined by Andrew Yang, Kirsten Gillibrand, John Hickenlooper, Michael Bennet, Marianne Williamson, and Eric Swalwell. While Night 1 had no shortage of big moments, which I covered in my winners and losers video for that evening, Night 2 was even more aggressive, more weird.
So, Mr. President, if you're listening, I want you to hear me, please.
And featured severe clashes between some of the biggest candidates in the race.
I was actually it was hurtful to hear you talk about the reputations of 2 United States senators who built their reputations and career on the segregation of race in this country. You also worked with them to oppose busing.
In this video, I'm going to give you plenty of highlights and analysis and distinguish the winners from the losers. While there were multiple people in both categories in this debate, it seems there was also a single definitive answer to this question: who won? Let's start with one of the most fun candidates in the race, Marianne Williamson. She probably surprised some people by actually having a few smart things to say. She talked about the need to take racial issues seriously and offered a broader perspective on the healthcare issues America faces.
We just wait till somebody gets sick, and then we talk about who's going to pay for the treatment and how they're going to be treated. What we need to talk about is why so many Americans have unnecessary chronic illnesses, so many more compared to other countries. It has to do with chemical policies, it has to do with environmental policies, it has to do with food policies.
Unfortunately, any interesting things she had to say were certainly overshadowed by the clownish nonsense that also escaped her lips. For example, she seemed to come down very hard against having plans.
It's really nice if we got all these plans, but if you think we're going to beat Donald Trump by just having all these plans, you got another thing coming.
Okay, so I don't think I need to explain why it probably wasn't a good idea to say that plans are superficial fixes, especially when compared to just saying "Make America Great Again."
Because he didn't win by saying he had a plan. He won by simply saying, "Make America Great Again." We've got to get deeper than just these superficial fixes, as important as they are.
Deeper than that, Williamson also falls into the same narrative that I've heard other Democrats express, that Trump just won by evoking a broad theme, MAGA, without any specific policy proposals. In fact, that is not true at all. Trump had very clear policy proposals. Build the wall is a policy. Ban Muslims from entering the country until we can figure out what the heck is going on, that's also a policy. They're not my favorite policies, but they're policies. Anyway, it's not really that false idea that hurt her in the debate. It's more the general impression that she likely made. She seems like a nice lady, but certainly out of her depth. Nothing made this more clear than her closing statement.
I have an idea about Donald Trump. Donald Trump is not going to be beaten just by insider politics talk. He's not going to be beaten just by somebody who has plans.
Why does she hate plans so much? I don't know if this is supposed to be an attack on Elizabeth Warren. I don't really know.
This man has reached into the psyche of the American people, and he has harnessed fear for political purposes. So, Mr. President, if you're listening, I want you to hear me, please. I'm going to harness love for political purposes. I will meet you on that field, and sir, love will win.
Yeah, my heart goes out to her, but in my view, the debate wasn't just a loss for her. It was the end of her campaign. But hey, at least she's memorable, which is more than we can say for some. Hickenlooper, in my view, had the most forgettable performance of the night, although he did have a couple of reasonably strong moments.
If you'd ever told me any time in my life that this country would sanction federal agents to take children from the arms of their parents, put them in cages, actually put them up for adoption, in Colorado we call that kidnapping, I would have told you.
That point might even have scored him some support if it weren't for the fact that that point has been made by virtually every candidate in the race. But I'm afraid that at the end of the day, the only thing voters will take away from him is that he's a scientist who hates socialism.
If we turn towards socialism, we run the risk of helping to re-elect the worst president in American history. Well, I share the sense of urgency. I'm a scientist, so socialism, and in that sense, is not the solution. The bottom line is, if we don't clearly define that we are not socialists, the Republicans are going to come at us every way they can and and call us socialists. I admire the sense of urgency and how important it is to do climate change. I'm a scientist.
I didn't repeat anything there, by the way. He did. Also, I want to just point out a little piece of nonsense he said. He said that we should follow his model and get near universal coverage.
In Colorado, we brought businesses and nonprofits together. We got near universal health care coverage.
He also said healthcare is a right.
I believe that health care is a right and not a privilege.
That's just illogical. Either it's a right and we must guarantee it to everyone, or it's not a right, just a good thing, and near universality is good enough. Again, I don't know if a bad argument will cause damage, but his self-repetition and failure to make a strong original case for himself will mean he's unlikely to gain much additional attention from this debate. As one of the least popular candidates in the race, a failure to create traction is a significant loss. He entered the debate as a relatively unremarkable character and left it in the same condition. Eric Swalwell also did little to make his mark on the debate. He started out strong enough with this speech.
I was 6 years old when a presidential candidate came to the California Democratic Convention and said, it's time to pass the torch to a new generation of Americans. That candidate was then Senator Joe Biden. Joe Biden was right when he said it was time to pass the torch to a new generation of Americans 32 years ago.
Unfortunately, he jumped the shark with the torch passing bit.
Pass the torch, pass the torch, pass the torch, pass the torch.
And got shut down pretty handily by Senator Sanders.
Here's the solution. Pass the torch. Pass the torch to the generation that's going to feel the effects of climate change. Pass the torch to the generation that's invented.
Yeah, no one's passing any torches to this guy. This debate was a loss for Swalwell. Now, there was an upside to the passing the torch line. It was a way of attacking Biden and Bernie simultaneously. Hitting both frontrunners was a strong idea, one much better executed by another minor candidate. Throughout the debate, Bennet hammered both Biden and Bernie pretty well. Here are some of his attacks on Bernie over Medicare for All.
Look, first of all, I agree completely with Bernie about what the fundamental challenge we're facing as a country is. Where I disagree is on his solution on Medicare for All. You know, I have proposed getting to universal health care, which we need to do. It is a right. Health care is a right. I believe the way to do that is by finishing the work we started with Obamacare and creating a public option. I believe we will get there much more quickly if we do that.
But wait.
When Senator Sanders says that Canada is single payer, there are 35 million people in Canada.
Now, I don't buy Bennett's argument that bigger is necessarily worse. Every U.S. bureaucracy is at least 10 times bigger than the Canadian equivalent. But I don't think anyone would argue that the CIA, the FBI, or the U.S. military operate less effectively than their Canadian counterparts. I also don't see why a public option would be a faster way to deliver universal coverage than expanding Medicare. So I don't agree with Bennett's arguments. But it's undeniable that he used arguments that the people he's trying to appeal to will likely appreciate, and he delivered them effectively. He was perhaps even more effective in his attacks against Biden.
The deal that he talked about with Mitch McConnell was a complete victory for the Tea Party. It extended the Bush tax cuts permanently and put in place the mindless cuts that we still are dealing with today. That was a great deal for Mitch McConnell. It was a terrible deal for America.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you.
Bennet, I think, overall scored some points, and the easily forgettable candidate got some attention.
The president has turned the border of the United States into a symbol of nativist hostility that when what we should be represented by is the Statue of Liberty, which has brought my parents to this country to be.
By no means do I expect his performance to turn him into a real contender in the race, but I'd count this as a win for his campaign. I was surprised by how well he did. I was equally surprised by how poorly Gillibrand performed. Those unfamiliar with the candidate may have been impressed by the clear, progressive message she articulated.
Until you go to the root of the corruption, the money in politics, the fact that Washington is run by the special interests, you are never going to solve any of these problems. To get money out of politics through publicly funded elections.
I full-heartedly agree with the points that she made here, but at the end of the day, Gillibrand was a generally grating, disruptive presence on stage. For whatever reason, she seemed to try to get a word in virtually every time someone else finished talking.
Both their perspectives.
Well, Senator, please. We are going to talk about health care at length. Continue the question.
I wrote the part in Senator Sanders' bill. I wrote the part in Senator Sanders' bill.
The issue, if I may say, is not generational.
Let's please.
Right. From the Republicans.
Go ahead, 30 seconds.
The reason why.
Thank you, Senator.
And can I just address this for a second? And I want to talk directly to America's women.
Now, it's perfectly acceptable to assert yourself in a debate every now and then. Small candidates surely need to fight for every moment they can grab. But Gillibrand took it too far, violating the first rule of showmanship: always leave them wanting more. By the end of the night, I think most viewers were left tired of Gillibrand.
Women in America are on fire.
Andrew Yang pretty much had the opposite problem. He was asked few questions, given little time, and he politely waited for his turn the entire time. When he finally did get a chance to speak, Yang's calm, dry delivery failed to make much of an impact.
Sorry?
How would you do that?
If we had a value-added tax at even half the European level, it would generate over $800 billion in new revenue. It would spend the money and it would circulate through our regional economies and neighborhoods, creating millions of jobs, making our families stronger and healthier. We'd save money on things like incarceration. So for the average family with 2 or 3 adults, it'd be $24,000 to $36,000 a year.
Okay,
China, we need to cooperate with them on climate change, AI, and other issues. North Korea.
This is not that far off from the style Yang's fans have gotten used to. But contrasted against the passionate speaker surrounding him, Yang sounded tired, bored, apathetic. It was a real shame. Yang is one of the most interesting and creative candidates in the race. Without the stage presence, he wasn't able to effectively deliver his message. And while UBI can certainly gain him some traction, his refusal to dig deep into other policies he supports made him look like a one-trick pony. In fact, the idea that UBI is a one-size-fits-all solution for Yang became kind of an unintentional laugh line.
I would pass a $1,000 freedom dividend for every American adult starting at age 18, which would speed us up on climate change.
Now, I like Yang, but the moderators didn't do him any favors, and he didn't do himself any favors either. The night was a clear loss for the Yang gang. Now let's talk about the major candidates, beginning with Senator Sanders. Some of his supporters seem to expect that Bernie would deliver a knockout punch to Joe Biden during this debate. This was clearly not his plan, nor the way he tends to handle debates. Bernie despises personal attacks and is typically extremely cordial with Democrats. We all remember his emails line in his debate with Hillary Clinton.
The American people are sick and tired of hearing about your damn emails.
Thank you.
I didn't expect Bernie to criticize Biden aggressively at all, and surely he did not. The strongest attack he made on Biden was to contrast his record on one issue.
Senator Sanders, 30 seconds.
One of the differences that Joe and I have in our record is Joe voted for that war. I helped lead the opposition to that war, which is a total disaster. Second of all.
Now, this, in my opinion, was the correct strategy. Bernie, already polling in second place, really just needed to hang on during this debate and avoid taking any serious damage. Bennet made some strong swipes, but at the end of the day, Bernie did a pretty good job of holding his own.
People don't like their private insurance companies. They like their doctors and hospitals. Under our plan, people go to any doctor they want, any hospital they want.
Bernie made one clear, if small, mistake in the debate, which was his response to Rachel Maddow.
Senator Sanders, a Vermont newspaper recently released portions of an interview you gave in 2013. Quote, "My own view on guns is, everything being equal, states should make those decisions." Do you now think there's a federal role to play?
That's a mischaracterization of my thinking.
It's a
Look,
quote of
we
you.
have a gun.
Yeah, it's not a good idea to get in a debate with the moderators, and even though Bernie went on to defend his record on this issue pretty effectively, saying a direct quote is misrepresenting him sounds pretty bad to your average viewer. This probably caused a bit of damage, but at the end of the day, I think Bernie made up for it with the type of conversation you can usually expect from him.
That health care, in my view, is a human right. And we have got to pass a Medicare for all single-payer system. I believe that we must make public colleges and universities tuition-free. Yes, they will pay more in taxes, but less in health care for what they get. That Trump is a phony, that Trump is a pathological liar and a racist. That's how we beat Trump. We expose him for the fraud that he is. Listen, I find it hard to believe that every other major country on earth somehow has figured out a way to provide health care to every man, woman, and child, and in most cases, they're spending 50% per capita what we are spending. The function of the healthcare system today is to make billions in profits for the insurance companies. They will spend hundreds of millions of dollars lying to the American people. We'll do it the way real change has always taken place. We will have Medicare for all when tens of millions of people are prepared to stand up and tell the insurance companies that health care is a human right, not something to make huge profits off of.
Now, in a debate with fewer candidates, or one in which Bernie is an underdog, I would say that this was a loss for the senator. But considering the fact that he's already right near the top of the pack, all he really needed to do was avoid serious damage. I really don't think that little scrape up with Maddow will hurt him that badly, so I think this was a narrow win for Bernie. But going forward, he's definitely going to need to find some new things to say, or at least new ways of saying those things. Otherwise, his strategy is going to start hurting him. Joe Biden seemed to implement a similar strategy to the one Bernie seemed to be employing. Do your shtick and avoid taking damage. At the beginning of the night, I would say he was doing pretty well. Although he did begin the night by completely avoiding a really good question.
Recently, in remarks to a group of wealthy donors, as you were speaking about the problem of income inequality in this country, you said, nobody has to be punished, no one's standard of living would change, nothing would fundamentally change. What did you mean by that?
What I meant by that is, look, Donald Trump thinks Wall Street built America. Ordinary middle-class Americans build America. My dad used to have an expression.
There was no follow-up, and I think Biden skated by on that one. His performance showed improvement as he effectively projected a knowledge of legislation.
That's why I think we should triple the amount of money we spend for Title I schools. That's why I think we should have universal pre-K. That's why there should be free community college, cutting in half the cost of college. We do not have anyone have to pay back a student debt when they get out. They're making less than $25,000 a year.
He also connected emotionally with the audience.
My wife and daughter were killed in an automobile accident. My two boys were really very badly injured. I couldn't imagine what it'd be like had I not had adequate health care available immediately.
A number of small candidates came after him. They may have scored a bit on him, but Biden could easily have recovered from all that. What will almost certainly cause him lasting damage is the fact that the most memorable moment from both nights was his exchange with Kamala Harris, and she absolutely mopped the floor with him.
Growing up, my sister and I had to deal with the neighbor who told us her parents couldn't play with us because we were black. And I will say also that in this campaign, we have also heard, and I'm going to now direct this at Vice President Biden, I do not believe you are a racist, but I also believe, and it's personal, and I was actually it was hurtful to hear you talk about the reputations of two United States senators who built their reputations and career on the segregation of race in this country. You also worked with them to oppose busing. You know, there was a little girl in California who was part of the second class to integrate her public schools. And she was bused to school every day. And that little girl was me.
It's a mischaracterization of my position across the board. I did not praise racist.
Yes, you did.
Here's The Atlantic quoting Biden's comments about segregationist James Eastland. I was in caucus with James O. Eastland, Biden said at a fundraiser. He never called me boy. He always called me son. The Atlantic also go on to point out, the anecdote made no sense, either as storytelling or as politics. Boy is a well-known situational racial epithet in the South, but why would Eastland have called Biden by it? A CNN article quotes Biden giving a speech in honor of John Stennis, comparing him to Confederate General Stonewall Jackson. And as all of my colleagues have said here today, and you'll hear others say more of, he truly does stand like a stone wall. He is the rock-bound integrity of the United States Congress. That same article would go on to explain that the two actually had a long-lasting warm relationship, and that Stennis was a leading member of a group of Southern senators who frequently opposed civil rights bills and later the establishment of a federal holiday honoring Martin Luther King Jr. in 1983.
That is not true, number one. Number two, if we want to have this campaign litigated on who supports civil rights and whether I did or not, I'm happy to do that.
Vice President Biden, do you agree today that you were wrong to oppose busing in America then?
No.
Do you agree?
I did not oppose busing in America.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did.
This has been widely reported, including in my 10 Problems for Joe Biden video, which, by the way, you can watch without ads because it's demonetized. Here's what Vox had to say about it. Busing was one of the first issues to define Joe Biden's early political career. They also quote him as saying, "I have become convinced that busing is a bankrupt concept." This establishes that he didn't just have a problem with a legal mechanism or some procedural detail. He opposed the concept itself.
What I opposed is busing ordered by the Department of Education.
Wrong.
Well, there was a failure of states to integrate public schools in America. So that's where the federal government must step in. That's why we have the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act. There are moments in history where states fail to preserve the civil rights of all people.
Now, this exchange was enough to make the first debate a loss for Biden and a win for Kamala Harris. I predicted that either Buttigieg or Kamala would probably make a move against Biden in this debate, and it turns out it was her and her alone. She planned the attack and carried it out flawlessly. But Kamala also distinguished herself in a number of ways. She did a great job of delivering canned lines.
You know what? America does not want to witness a food fight. They want to know how we're going to put food on their table. Yes?
Over and over again, she demonstrated passion, knowledge, and confidence on stage.
Do you think that Democrats have a responsibility to explain how they will pay for every proposal they make along those lines?
Where was that question when the Republicans and Donald Trump passed a tax bill that benefits the top 1%?
Get to you. Hang on. We're going to get
to stage. I would like to speak on the issue of race. No one should have to work more than one job to have a roof over their head and food on the table. I will release children from cages. I will get rid of the private detention centers. This microphone that the President of the United States holds in her hand is used in a way.
Harris was clearly the star of the night. It was a clear win for her. And that in itself is not good news for the candidate she's been neck and neck with in the polls. Pete had several reasonably strong moments throughout the debate.
And if you look at what China is doing, they're using technology for the perfection of dictatorship. If leadership consists of forming a consensus around a divisive issue, this White House has divided us around a consensus issue. The American people want a pathway to citizenship. I believe in reducing student debt. It's logical to me that if you can refinance your house, you ought to be able to refinance your student debt. And for a party that associates itself with Christianity, to say that it is okay to suggest that God would condone putting children in cages has lost all claim to ever use religious language again.
Vice President.
But the most critical point of the debate for Pete was when he was asked about a serious issue unfolding right now in South Bend.
Your community of South Bend, Indiana, has recently been in uproar over an officer-involved shooting. Why has that not improved over your 2 terms as mayor?
Pete's immediate response was pretty good.
Because I couldn't get it done. My community is in anguish right now.
Unfortunately, Buttigieg failed to present a solution to the problem.
I'm not allowed to take sides until the investigation comes back. The officer said he was attacked with a knife, but he didn't have his body camera on.
He didn't even have a response to Swalwell's critique.
And I accept responsibility for that because I'm in charge.
Policy, you should fire the chief.
This will be investigated, and there will be accountability for the officer involved.
But you're the mayor. You should fire the chief.
Pete clearly conveyed that he cares and that he feels bad about this situation.
It's a mess, and we're hurting.
But if I were a black voter, I'd probably be pretty sick of hearing this kind of thing from Democratic politicians. I think black voters hear this all the time. Republicans don't want to help. Democrats wish they could. Pete's sorry. But for millions of black and brown voters, I'm fairly confident sorry just isn't good enough. Pete failed to explain what he had learned from this situation or how he's going to make it better. It's good he acknowledged the failure, but again, not good enough. I think most Americans might be seriously questioning why they should entrust the highest office in the land to a small town mayor who can't even get that job done right. This moment, I think, made him a loser in this debate.
The average American is woefully undereducated about the history of race in the United States.
So that's how I saw the night 2 debate. Kamala Harris was the clear biggest winner of the night, with Bernie and Bennet also doing what they needed to do. For everyone else on stage, the night was a loss, with Pete and especially Biden being the most prominent losers. I'd guess Williamson, Hickenlooper, Swalwell, and probably Gillibrand have pretty much eliminated themselves from the running, whether they know it or not. But as for Yang, I'm sorry, we're all out of time. Thanks for watching this video, guys. Congrats on getting to the end. I dropped a similar video about night 1 just a couple of days ago, so definitely go check that out. Also, if you're new to the channel, I have done a ton of videos about the 2020 election, so go ahead, browse around. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and turn on those notifications. Shout out to the patrons, shout out to the notification squad, and I'll see you guys in the comments.